Hello, everyone. We want to give you a warm welcome to today's digital event. I am joined here by Kelsey, who is the Sales Operation Manager at ArchVision, and Corey, who is the CEO. I'm Sam Anderson. I will be your host today, and I'm a technical marketing assistant here for ArchVision. Today, we will be covering Expansive, the 3D asset libraries with your ArchVision accounts, and so we will be talking about a lot of the different assets that you can have access to. Now, throughout this digital event, we are going to start with an introduction, and then we'll dive into a demo, and at the very end, we'll cover Q&A. So in the Zoom window, you'll probably see that there is a Q&A option. Please use that to put your questions, and we will do our best to answer them at the end of the demonstration. We also have some polls that we'll be doing throughout the event, so keep an eye out for that. Those will be popping out throughout. That just gives us a little more information about what types of content you want to learn about. So we are here for you as a resource today. We want to help you understand all of the different options that you have as creators. And so with that, Corey, I'm going to go ahead and just toss it off to you. Corey, I believe you're on mute. We can't hear ya.
Yes, he is on mute. Thank you.
There we go. There we go. All
Yeah.
good.
All prepared for today. All right. Thanks, Sam, for the introduction. I appreciate that. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Give a little bit of background on ArchVision just before we get into some of the weeds here that I want to share with you all today. So ArchVision's been around since the 90s, basically creating content, 3D content for architects and designers. Started out in application called 3D Viz and delivered awesome libraries back in the day of photorealistic content. And just fast forward all the way to today, where we are kind of reinventing the company and bringing new technology to the platform and new content. We've expanded our libraries in some very massive ways, and we have really changed and reshaped the actual content that we have, and we'll go through that here in just a second. So what are we talking about with regards to technology today? When I show these assets and we go through the content, one of the core pieces of technology behind the scenes that we use is our RPC technology. We have started working on this again in the 90s, and it's evolved over time to this year, I should say, marks well beyond our 20th year in business doing work with RPC and the technology. But we have really pushed the limits, I think, right now to really way beyond where we thought we'd ever have kind of developed the technology to when we first started with the asset creation pipelines that we made and the technology that we're building. And that's, things have changed over the years, obviously, with how data gets stored and transferred and cloud storage versus things on disk and so on and so forth. But also materials and how materials are portable now with, let's say, PBR material structures and things like that. And we've adapted and adopted as much as we could and can, and we still are, into our RPC technology. Our RPC's technology spans a bunch of different applications. We make plugins that help us deliver the assets to your CAD or BIM applications. So 3D Studio Max and Rhino, SketchUp, Revit, Unreal Engine, we all have plugins for these, and there are a few more that we're working on also. And that's the main conduit, if you will, between the content library and your actual scenes that you're working in. One thing I'll note here, we don't have a list of rendering engines that are parallel to this slide, but I'll say the RPCs, if you don't know much about RPCs, they're designed to be able to relay all the geometry and material information from the CAD package to virtually any rendering technology that that you have at your fingertips these days. So Enscape, V-Ray, Corona, just to name a few, all are able to consume the RPCs that we're putting in these applications. All right, I'm going to hop right into some show and tell here. One of our evolutions, if you will, of our platform over time has been our delivery mechanism, if you will. Where does the content come from that we deliver from ArchVision, and how does it get to our customers? Our sister company called AVAIL has made a product which is also called AVAIL. It's a content management solution. We've worked extensively with them to bring our ArchVision content and our partner content into the AVAIL platform as our delivery framework. So we established this, let's say, a relationship with AVAIL on a business side, where all of our content comes into what's called AVAIL Marketplace. So AVAIL Marketplace is designed to have vendors like ourselves and other companies deliver content to channels of content, if you will, to our ArchVision, our AVAIL subscribers. So anyone who's on AVAIL has access to this marketplace, and as new marketplace vendors come in, they'll get notifications about that, and they'll be able to subscribe and get access to that content. In this marketplace section here, you'll see anything that has essentially a horizontal colored line on it. For the most part, is ArchVision content. We have our own CAD details and BIM related content for Revit and so on and so forth. But we're talking more today about the RPC content, which is you'll see these cards here where it's Laubwerk, Renderpeople, which we've mentioned in the preparation for this meeting, or for this webinar. And then we've got RPC Prime and the purple layers down here, and then Seed Mesh and Turbo Squid, which I believe will be either discontinuing the Turbo Squid option or rebranding that down the road. So what I have to do here in order to get this content from the marketplace over into AVAIL is subscribe to the channel, and basically say unlock the channel. You have to pay for a subscription for ArchVision content for Laubwerk and Renderpeople. Those price tags are about $300 a year to access these libraries, and it varies based on your company size and so on, but generally speaking, starting at $300, you get access to these channels of content. So let's just hop into the channels list here. We have the Laubwerk channel here, and I'm going to open that up. Our partnership with Laubwerk started about 4 years ago. We originally started this channel out with about, I don't know, 1,000 pieces of content. And the content that was originally put in this channel was all pretty, I'll say, pretty heavy, full density meshes and full resolution texture maps. Good for hero objects in a real-time, let's say, visualization project, but not great for populating, let's say, hundreds or tens or hundreds of trees in a particular Revit file, for instance. Our file, which I'll show in a minute in Revit, doesn't necessarily show or depict the amount of density of the file that is actually rendered by your rendering engine. So in Revit, we have a proxy mesh or proxy object, which is much more lightweight. So we don't necessarily bog down Revit or your CAD application with the asset. I'm talking about 2 million, 3 million triangle model actually bogging down a real-time engine when it's consumed in the renderer. Okay, so we took we took that to heart, and we worked on our plan for how we would build out more content, and in conjunction with Laubwerk. And so with the new library that's shipping soon, We not only have the full version, full density meshes of these in the high fidelity texture maps, but we have what we call LOD4, which is essentially a real-time ready asset. We pick different triangle count ranges to try to be as responsible about what was getting tossed at your real-time renders like Enscape or Twinmotion as an example, or even Lumion. Um, and so we were able to uh, basically work with Laubwerk and build a little technology stack to be able to help our create a ton of assets. So in this channel, moving forward, we'll have around 12,000 different um, variants of trees in here. I will slide this tag editor up here just so you can see the approach we take to this. So all this content is delivered to you in a very managed state. So it all comes pre-tagged. It's very easy to just kind of click and pick and filter yourself down into an asset that you want to just download and consume. So you don't have to go scrounging through a Windows file folder to go try and find all this stuff and figure out which one it is, and can you find a thumbnail of it, or open a PDF to go look at a picture of this. You can just come in here. You've got great thumbnails that are sitting here in the channel, and then you've got metadata sitting on top of that. And so if I was wanting to say you consume a, let's say, middle-aged palm tree, I can select middle-aged and Alexander palm as an example, and you can see all those tags automatically just start going away, the ones that we're not using, and then all the tags that are visible here are relevant to the content that's being displayed in my window here. So I can, if I wanted to, I can just download one of these assets, and now I can literally just drag and drop that directly into my Revit, Rhino, SketchUp project, or wherever there's an RPC plugin. Okay. But one step I want to take here just to kind of show how deep we kind of try to integrate with AVAIL is, and how much we try to give you as far as tools related to this content. So having it be in a managed state is one thing. Having it being easily downloadable and cloud hosted and drag and droppable into Revit is another. But if you need to evaluate this content before getting it downloaded and before getting it into your CAD application, we have designed and developed the preview window here, so you can preview all this content directly in 3D here. And even kind of probably of interest to some people is, let's say you're getting down to the wire on a project, and you're working on some images, and you need to literally hurry up and get the image out, and you don't have time to re-render an Enscape. You can actually grab the content from our channels here and take a snapshot of the content. You can position it if I wanted to look at it in plan or elevation or whatever, or some particular viewpoint for a car or person. You can arrange that directly in this view and take a snapshot of that and bring that snapshot into Photoshop and layer that in and do some post-production on the fly directly from this window here. So we're trying to kind of consider as many parts and pieces of your workflow as possible when we're building out the content channel and all the content that we're making. So just a few more things to point out on the Laubwerk content. So if I clear my search here and go out, you'll see we have many species. We label these, tag these by common name and botanical name as well. So you have access to find and search through those different methods, common name or botanical name. We make variants for each plant that's in this library. Variants will kind of give you kind of different branching layout and trunk size and things like that. Those will be a little bit more, they'll be different in between each variant. But then we also have different ages. So full grown tree versus a young tree. um, and then different seasons. So we debated whether we were going to add winter assets to the library, and it's kind of funny because it's like, how many renderings do you see with winter trees in them? Well, we they're there. People do them, so we did include winter models in this particular run of the content, or the build of the content that we put out there. Um, uh, but the seasons are important, right? Fall colors and summer colors are different, and depending on which time of the year you want to depict your design in, it's here and ready and to go, just drag and drop. So if I go to fall as an example, I can sort by fall trees, and we can start seeing colors here, and you'll see we have plants and trees. I can, let's say, go middle-aged fall, and I could pick let's pick tree as opposed to conifer. And then, so I'm just filtering through all this, right? And I can see all the shapes visually. It's all sitting right here. And if I found, let's say I wanted to use this shape and this color or this particular species, again, I'm going to download this, and then I'm going to just drag and drop this into my Revit Rhino SketchUp project. All right. I will pull over my Revit screen here, and just quick show and tell about the assets. So I don't have all 12,000 objects placed in here, obviously, but I do just grabbed a handful of the palm trees that we have in one of the plant kits by Laubwerk. I'm partial to these trees for maybe weather related reasons, but also because I just think I don't know why to me, they just show really, really well. So, they, the RPCs that are shown here, you'll see they're kind of in our billboard style. So you get a representation of scale and size, and where these, what the height of these are relative to your building project, because we give you this little icon, if you will. So I have Enscape running, so let me just grab Enscape. So essentially, place those assets in Revit, execute your Enscape process, and then you'll see this is the level of quality that we have in these assets. So we basically take that RPC and we pass on to Enscape um, the full fidelity mesh and all the textures. All that stuff is all packaged up inside the RPC for Enscape to consume it and render it. Okay. Yeah, so full 3D shadows are all there, all that good stuff. If I were to take a few minutes and hit render with V-Ray, these assets will render with V-Ray directly inside of Revit as well. And these assets will also render inside of Revit natively in the realistic mode. So you have an asset that is responsive to not just Enscape in this case, but even Revit's own rendering engine and V-Ray as an example. Okay. All right. I will now go back to AVAIL here. I will jump back out here, and I just want to hop into our Renderpeople library. A Renderpeople library, again, started 3 or 4 years ago. We had maybe 100 or so different people in this collection when we first started. But we have grown this library up to over 3,300 assets. Major focus on diversity, cultural diversity, gender, race, age, all that good stuff, different places and activities and clothing configurations, things like that. All these assets in here are static assets. So these are not animated in any way, shape, or form. But I can grab, let's say, a guy like this and do the same thing that we were doing over in the Laubwerk channel and preview this model. And I can get very good sense of to what this guy looks like and his pose. And again, like I mentioned earlier, if we needed to just take this person and grab him and make a PNG file of this guy and slap him into Photoshop, we could drag and drop someone in. We could drag and drop him in there. Okay. Just go through, take a glimpse of some of the assets in here. So let's look at age range. We have a lot of customers that are doing K through 12 schools and things like that. So we wanted to make sure that we were giving a good starting point for people to build on top of their Enscape asset libraries or their Twinmotion libraries or whatever, to give more diversity, more options. And these particular people all work really well, and they fit into I'd say the same styles that even Twinmotion and Enscape assets are in. We're conscious to try to pick out the right people so that when you have our people in with other libraries, that there's not a color mismatch, or the textures don't look wonky in different shading styles or whatever. Like we tried to take attention to detail to make sure these assets render um, uh, consistent across all of the rendering tools that these are consumed in. So, but you can see good collection here of children. And let me just grab this girl here, and I will drag and drop her over into Revit. I'm going to move Revit back over to my other screen just for a second and place her in here so you all can see kind of what the results of this content looks like. All right, and I'll move our Revit window back over here. And she's sitting down here. And I mentioned earlier, even in realistic mode in Revit, these assets will display. So if people are still doing some screenshots from Revit, our asset will render here. It's consuming all those trees in the background as well as some other project elements. So it's going to take just a second for this to actually populate the image in here. But basically, Revit is reading our data, they're reading the textures and the geometry, and it's relating all that information to the screen, the on-screen renderer for Revit. And then if you do happen to render with Revit cloud rendering or just the Revit renderer, these assets will also render there.
While that's loading, I'm actually gonna jump in here and talk a little bit about how we have been able to get some of these assets in Twinmotion and Unreal Engine by coming in first through Revit. So we can place some of these content library assets in Revit and then have them move into the visualization rendering engines, just like Corey said. So, kind of seeing them and all of the different options that you have. But as someone who has worked in both of those platforms and programs, and like coming from Revit, it's been super helpful to have it be the same in both of those without having to replace them. So it looks like we've got her up in Atom here.
She's populated here, right? So again, some of the processing time and things like that aren't necessarily, that's not on us per se, right? So the rendering engines will consume what they consume, and they will render at the speed that they regularly render at, usually with our stuff. So let me go back to just shaded mode here, and I will go ahead and grab Enscape, and let me pull that over. And so you'll see she comes in here in real time. So when I placed her, and she populated directly into Enscape. So this is like real, direct connection, if you will, between Revit and Enscape. As you all know, if you're using Enscape daily and you have it running on one screen and Revit on the other, as you're placing your content in there, you expect Revit to update, our content will update in real time. The workflow that Sam is talking about with regards to Twinmotion, I won't get into the details on that right now, but we will cover that in the future. And if you go back to Sam's webinar that she did just a couple weeks ago, I guess. Time flies. I can't remember how long ago it was. She covered some of this in her presentation to see how these RPCs can flow into Twinmotion. So, but yeah, so if you're using the new latest version of Enscape, for instance, I'll just point this out. The auto enhance AI enhancer for Enscape, for instance, it does a really good job with people and entourage. So even if you're looking for something more photorealistic than our people, these assets may not look good and great and hold up like right in front of the camera like this. But as architects and designers, we're not usually having people this close to the camera. So, you know, at this distance, you probably don't mind that person is not hyper photorealistic and you don't see every pore in their skin, as an example. But if you do need to get more photorealism out of this, most of these rendering engines these days are able to do some AI work on the image that you're producing and be able to replace those people with more photorealistic representations. And the results that I've seen coming from Enscape and D5, for instance, are pretty awesome. So, you know, in all honesty, we design this content, the RPC content, to be what we always kind of call a proxy for a future transaction. And what I mean by that is when you're in Revit and you have this proxy object here, we have the package of information for this RPC, and we are writing code and giving instructions for other pieces of technology to read that data from our file and consume it and bring it into their world where that future transaction, if you will, is taking place. So in this case with Enscape, the mesh and the texture represent in you know, in that renderable form. But when it comes to things like AI and some of the things that are going on with it, I look at these RPCs as being somewhat of a placeholder, if you will, for that photorealistic AI pass to be made. I fully expect our content to be used as let's say a reference for the AI to do its work, right? It's totally possible to do that, and it's already working within the Enscape and D5. So so that proxy for a future transaction and mentality is, hey, you can use this tree or this person coming from Laubwerk or Renderpeople, and it may not be photorealistic or it may not meet your exact needs, but your AI tools might actually fill in gaps for you on those accounts. Okay. Again, I'm not going to go rehash what I was, you know, totally what I was going into with regards to the tag panel down here, but again, the tags are here for you, presets. But I wanted to now segue into one other aspect about working with our content and our partner content inside of AVAIL. When you subscribe to this content and you get this channel, one of the next moves that you have to make is really decide who's going to get this content, how are you going to share it out, and who, you know, who might use this in your firm. So in this Render People channel right now, if you look up at the top, there's an icon up here that says edit shared users. If I click on that, this gives me an option for me to put in members of my team to share this channel out with. So if I have a Revit project team and they need access to the Render People library, you can invite them to your team, and put their emails, addresses in here, and literally invite them into the channel. You're giving them permission to use the content in this channel. Okay. But one other little nuance about this is once you are subscribed and you have people in and using that content, you're going to be able to get into a phase where you're actually able to make this content your own and start managing this content according to how your firm works. So with this Render People content, I'm set up as a channel member and I can edit the content in this channel. What that means is if I go back out to the Render People channel, and again, the same concept and tools apply to Laubwerk or any other vendor content that you get from us. If I right click over the top of this, I can, hold on, where'd he go? Let's download this guy. Again, I moved that piece of content so he wasn't showing up as downloaded. If I now right click over the top of this, you'll see you can add comments, flag this. I can add to channel. So I can literally create another channel in AVAIL. And let's say it was a project related channel. I can actually add this piece of content to a whole nother channel that could be directed specifically just for a project that I'm working on. So you can move content around from these channels and put them into other channels. But the reality is that it's the same single source of truth piece of content in every channel. So I'm not copying around the piece of content. The piece of content that I'm moving around is really just a reference. So again, go back to this concept of we do things like create these RPCs for future transactions. This is a very similar concept where we make sure that the single source of truth for that asset, whether it's a Laubwerk asset or a Render People asset, is something that stays true. The download location is honored, and that piece of content in another channel is only a reference to where it was located from the get-go. So you have the ability to also as editor in the channel to add more tags to this content. So if you want to start to kind of like characterize people differently than we have tagged, you can actually just start adding your own tags on top of this content in these channels. So again, it's just part of like making this content your own. So maybe an option here would be to, or an idea would be to add tags to the content that would be, let's say, a project number. So you might want to use a handful of assets out of here, tag them with a project number, and then the next time you come back into this channel, if you wanted to go find all those assets, or if you were instructing one of your team members to say, hey, we already have all those people that we used in project X, Y, or Z, go grab them out of the Render People channel, then you could go to the Render People channel, click on project AXYZ or whatever, and that would basically reduce down your direct the content directly to you. So you'd see the 25 or however many assets there were, and then you could start pulling from that content. I think that's covers most of what I wanted to show today with these two libraries and the basic ins and outs of this. I don't know if we have any questions that have popped up or if we want to open up to questions and answers now. I'm happy to do that.
Yeah, we just did another poll for our viewers today. So if you could let us know what you're thinking there, that would be great. And if you have any Q&A or questions, please feel free to add them to the Q&A in the Zoom user interface. I did want to just talk about how helpful some of these tags are. I was working on a project where I needed some basketball players in Chicago, and I was able to come in here and find them quite easily and drag and drop them in. And I also love that you mentioned, the winter trees. Like as a visualization artist, I do really love a winter season. So I really appreciate that. Having the option to pick the level of different trees and search them by their true name versus their common name is such a valuable part of the asset. So I, as a user, am very thankful for some of that. I do want to chat with you, Corey, a little bit. I know, like, as I've gotten to work with you a lot, something that has been really important to you is kind of the agnostic nature of these assets. Do you mind like sharing a little bit about your philosophy around this and kind of how you imagine like some of how the future will be using assets such as these?
Yeah, so I mean, we can even zoom out a little bit further, just as far as like why render people, why Laubwerk? Let's start there, just for a quick second, right? Because you these content vendors in particular, they've been around for a while, right? Brands that are known in certain circles. These are brand names that may not be well known to the Revit, the SketchUp, the Rhino user bases. And so the concept of, hey, we know these brands are used by a finite group of people. I want to democratize their content with them, for them, together. So getting the Render People collection or Laubwerk assets into Revit, as an example, is if they were to do this on their own, it would not, not necessarily be technically practical for them to support a Revit application, as an example. For those who work in Revit know, you know, it try to get an OBJ with a texture into Revit and see where you end up with that. Some people get it to work, some people don't. It's hit or miss, but imagine a company like this trying to bring in 3,000 assets into Revit and make a library of meshed content with textures. So democratization starts with finding the content in the first place that we want to democratize. So Render People, Laubwerk, we picked these brands as the first initial brands to do this. We process all these 3,000 plus assets through our RPC pipeline, and we prepare it for applications that they don't necessarily have ready in their own list of distribution channels. So if you were buying Laubwerk Render People assets from them directly, which I don't discourage, people can still buy assets from them. You're going to buy an asset that might be in 3 Studio Max format or Maya or something like that. Maybe Rhino or SketchUp. But the way the files are distributed, and a lot of vendors are in this way, even TurboSquid itself as an example, like going to TurboSquid and buying a model, trying to figure out which file format to download and all that stuff. It's hard, right? It gets complicated. It makes things sticky. And when you're on deadlines, it's hard to fumble through all that stuff. So again, RPC as a container takes takes all that conversion process, all the thought around trying to figure out which file format it is that you need to import and what's a texture map, what resolution texture map. We take care of all that for you and democratize the content so that you don't have to worry about it. It should be drag and drop. So as we move forward and we're going through this, we'll bring more vendors on. You'll see more brands coming into the ecosystem. We'll democratize yet more content. But even more interesting from our perspective and future forward types of concepts are things like, okay, Render People, let's say, has rigged content. What value does rigged content have in the whole AEC ecosystems out there and rendering pipelines and so on and so forth? We're analyzing this right now. We've been thinking about it for a while. How do you democratize that type of content, right? So that a firm can grab a posed character or rigged character, and drag and drop them into Revit and render with Twinmotion and get a walking person in Twinmotion, or other tools. Let's say Lumion as an example. There isn't an easy pathway through that right now, but I have my sights set on trying to figure out how we do that with RPC and how we take our interest in democratization to that next level. And I say animated people or rigged people, but I'll also say, what about animated trees and so on and so forth, or rigged cars and so on. So we're looking at all of this stuff because back in the day when we had our RPC plugin early on inside of 3 Studio Max, we handled a lot of that stuff I'll say automatically behind the scenes with walking people, rotating wheels on cars and turning on splines and things like that. Things that are easily, I say easily, second nature to 3 Studio Max, but not so second nature to a Revit application or Rhino or SketchUp, and certainly harder to translate into an Enscape or other rendering engines, right, that attach to those BIM and CAD applications. So democratization is absolutely a major topic internally, and it's a mission. So
Awesome. Yeah, thank you for sharing some of that. I think that's very valuable to kind of understand like ArchVision's vision for the future and kind of taking a look at some of the values that y'all have. And with that, I want to ask you, and you don't have to say like a brand name or anything like that, but what would your dream or like, yeah, what would your dream assets be for kind of adding into the ArchVision library? I know you talked about animated trees and animated people, but is there anything that you want to put out into the world of, I would love to get these type of assets in here?
well, let me yeah, I want to go to our channel of content just for a second because I can, you know, we I'll say the world is our oyster, so to speak. We can make content and we can put it in our own in our own library and we can build it up, right? Which is no different than what some of our rendering companies are doing, right? So Enscape has their own Enscape asset library, and Chaos Cosmos is there, and Lumion's library. So, you know, we have our own library also. We have our own content. So we have modeled cars. We have dealt with scanned assets and scanned people and things like that. My I don't necessarily want ArchVision to be in the business that we're actually making the content ourselves. The partnerships that we have, um, the dream is more connected to what technologically can we do to um, evolve their businesses, if you will, as well as our business, if that makes sense. So, you know, um, there are a lot of companies that are in this content world that have invested times and energy and technology in building their pipelines to create their own assets. And some of that technology is actually also something that we can democratize and help us build out and help them build out more robust and um what's another good term? I say robust and um uh picking out a good word. Uh People, cars, and trees as standards are, for the most part, it's not everybody's looking for someone who looks like that person, but they want them to look a little bit different. So the diversity, the concept of diversity, if you will, is it's stuck. It can get sticky, if you will. There's a lot of people asking for a lot of different content. Not every library will solve the needs. So we're looking at ways of trying to let these vendors build out more content faster, better, more diverse, and literally able to let customers drive and ask questions, ask prompts, send out prompts, for instance, for content and build content on the fly. So that's the dream for me. Is I think putting content in libraries is short-sighted, and the long-term vision and dream is to work with these vendors, including ourselves, to build out using some of these new tools with AI and ML, if you will, to really unleash and untie um, this content from the legacy ways of how we made these before.
I love that, and it seems like it's all about making these assets accessible, and that's so important. And I know that any creators who are on the call right now are probably very appreciative of that. So truly thank you, ArchVision, for all the efforts that you're making for these vendors to be able to make these assets accessible. This is such a great, robust tool that you have, and that people can really easily drag and drop stuff into their engine or their modeling program of choice. So with that, we actually don't have any unanswered questions right now. So I think we can keep it to this here. This has been such a great demo. Thank you for taking time to share with all of us. And also on from the ArchVision side, I want to thank everyone, all participants today for taking time out of your day to join us. We are truly appreciative to all of you. And with that, we will say farewell. If you have any questions at all, feel free to reach out to us. You can find our email on the website if needed. So with that, I'll say thank you and farewell.